So today we're going to be talking about the coming collapse. There are many forms of collapse, many forms of civil war, civil strife, all that sort of nonsense. It is certainly worth knowing about how these sorts of things can take form, and it's probably worth knowing that, if you're watching this, you've probably seen a couple of people talk about the fact that, there's a guy who's an expert on civil wars. He said that the country is heading for a civil war. There's also an awful lot of content just coming up on YouTube for people now, I think, about how civilizations have these cycles, and it seems to be that we're now at the end of the cycle, in that you have quite a strong meteoric rise, a period of stagnation or decline, minor decline, and then you have a very abrupt point of collapse. And what I'm going to talk about in this video is just about preparations for that kind of thing. I personally think that those are probably true, and that those things are coming. But, to what degree, I'm actually not quite sure. So just to touch first on, this was maybe a few months ago, where you saw quite a few figures in British media talking about the fact that, yes, here's this expert whose name I can't remember, I do apologise, but here's this expert. He predicts that the UK is now headed for civil war. You've got these 5 particular things, and we're probably headed for civil war because of that. You've got all these boxes ticked. Civil war is going to happen. So first of all, I don't think that civil wars work like that. I don't think it's a tick box exercise. That kind of goes without saying, and I'm not going to try and misconstrue his whole argument as being that. But I think for a lot of people, in a funny way, and this is the best way that I can phrase it, civil war, the idea of a civil war and a reset that way is actually an idea of relief. Like, we finally have this explosion of pressure that's finally released, and change happens. We can build back from the collapse. We can build back something that is more just traditional, potentially more authentic, and more in line with the human experience, and just something that isn't the bureaucracy, the ruled versus rulers class that we have right now, which is where you have basically the populations hating their rulers more than any king or dictator ever really was, which is where you end up, because when you have a democracy and you have this kind of thing, eventually, no matter what form of government you have, whether it's a democracy or not, I suppose, at some point you're going to end up with a bureaucracy that's ever expanding. And I'll go into this in another video as to why this is almost inevitable. But you end up with this, ever expanding bureaucracy that basically, becomes so large that it can only exist by justifying itself, basically giving itself make work. So this is where all the paperwork and the bureaucracy in our current society really comes from. Just people being given jobs by the state, because otherwise no one's going to vote for the state, whoever that may be. I've already gone off tangent here. There's quite a few things pointing towards civil war or some level of unrest. When you have all these ingredients, supposedly get a civil war, and what this gentleman was talking about was the fact that quite a lot of these boxes are ticked for a civil war to happen. And while we might not get a civil war that is really cool, like that film Civil War that came out a year or so ago, like the American Civil War, all that sort of stuff, people like to think of civil war as a releasing of all the pressure, a rebuilding back to a genuine society, and brilliant, we've now got this sort of clean slate that we can pick up from. That's not usually how a lot of civil wars go, and I don't think that if we do have a civil war, it's going to end up like that. An awful lot of civil wars can end up looking like Somalia does right now. An awful lot of civil wars can end up looking like Ireland did for fucking God knows how long, probably from the 1910s onwards. Civil wars can look like that, just this low level of constant, acts of terrorism, acts of like sabotage, just very little political stability. And without sounding too much like I'm from like the World Economic Forum or something like that, that is actually quite bad for the general population. Not, it's not like the vast majority of people are not, the groups of terrorists going at it. The vast majority of people are trying to live normal lives, and they are held back economically and in their normal lives because they live in an unstable and unpredictable nation, which therefore means that not a lot of people are willing to invest for long periods of time because they don't know what things are going to be like in 2 years' time, let alone 5 years or 10. So that is why, it's not all civil wars are made equal. Basically, you have different ones. With the civil war that's coming to the UK, I really don't know if English people are the type of people to actually take up arms in the same way that even the Irish, had, a small percentage of the population committing crimes and murders. I really don't even know if the English are going to do that level of civil war. For every civil war that ends in a victory, for every French Revolution, you also have examples of the opposite, where the general population actually put up with the poor conditions more and more and more. South Africa is an example of this right now. North Korea is an example of this right now. These are countries where the population, even North Korea, they know that their country is different from the rest of the world, and that they are under a particularly repressive and anti-human regime, and that there is like they're essentially in an experiment. They're in something else. The rest of the world is not having to live with what they're going through. They know that. And like I say, South Africa is another really good example of, right now, a country where I think something like only a quarter of the population are working and the rest of them are on welfare. So the average person basically has to work for 4 people. Yet they still do it. There are still people living middle-class lifestyles in South Africa, supporting that massive population. And they are actually doing it. They're not leaving. They're not taking up arms against their government. You have, blips and glitches in the system like Orania, which you can go and look up. That's Orania, I think it's called. But that is by far not the dominant strategy for most people living there. Now, maybe you get something into the atmosphere like there appears to be now, and those sorts of movements become far more palatable to the average person. And then, as part of a larger worldwide movement, places like Orania become far more accepted, and they're not able to kind of develop beyond glitches, like I say, little blips, up until this point. I think that is probably quite fair. But like I say, for every island and for every Somalia, there is also a South Africa, there's a North Korea, and yes, to be fair, there is also in America. There is also in England. There was a civil war, obviously, as well. You have so many different kinds of civil war. Now, what would happen in the UK, and what is the point of this video, I can't predict. And even with this guy predicting civil war, and a lot of people seeming to say, yes, that's probably quite likely, even with that on the table, I'm not sure how it's going to go. We have quite a corrupt and bankrupt government, that goes without saying, who don't really care about the average population. I think it's quite easy to see at this point that they are in power. They know that they're never going to get back into power, and they're going to basically now run it until the wheels come off. They're going to import everything and everyone that will make you unhappy and more likely to revolt. And they're just going to do that until they're kind of forced out of power. That maybe there's a future where it doesn't end in bloodshed like that, but they are just going to continue to keep up the large scale migration that no one in England has been happy with for the past 60 years. They're going to keep up all the laws, all the hate speech laws, that kind of thing. Everything that they're doing now is with is basically with hate for the Homer Simpsons of the UK in mind. If you're a white van man, if you painted a roundabout near you with a red cross recently, things are done with you in mind, and they're specifically done to stuff your nose into it. And the thing is, you are a normal person if you do that kind of thing. You are healthy, you are normal. You don't want to live in a country where basically hostile invaders are being imported into you, and you can't even fly your own flag and speak proudly of your own country without it causing either a violent reaction or offence of some kind, which apparently makes you liable for like jailing or repression. It's normal to think that is a horrible way to live. So being out, going out in the middle of the night and painting roundabouts and stuff is the normal way to be, and that's totally fine. But just know that the current government are specifically pursuing policies and doing things that will make you angry, and that seems to be there seems to be a little more effort into it than that. So, if you're getting into politics, maybe don't look at them and try and figure them out. There's nothing there to really figure out, and what little ideology there might be behind them is not worth the effort of figuring it out. If you've ever encountered any very annoying socialist university students, that's basically what you're dealing with here, but them actually being given power. Because of that, because they've got 3.5 at least, they've probably got 3.5, they probably have, things change, I'd love to be wrong, but let's say for argument's sake that at this point they've got I'm saying 3.5 because that's optimistic. It's closer to 4. Let's just say they've got 4 years now to do what they want. The first year has been pretty bad, and if it's a sign of things to come, then you need to hold down. Now, I am an optimist, and I do think that things are in the future going to get better. There's no way that this sort of thing can continue, and at the risk of sounding like the very person that I was criticising at the start of this video, with regards to a civil war would be a nice big release of pressure. When it comes to this, it's obvious that people are already pushing back on this and revolting against it, and I think that there's going to be such a massive shift in the future, come the next election, that things are never going to be the same. However, it's just simply getting to that next election, or getting to the next political point, the next point at which there is a changing of the guard, and we have a new government, and we have a new way of doing things. It's getting to that point which is important, and it's getting to that point without losing your mind, because it can feel so crushing. It can feel very crushing sometimes to think that you're potentially in your early 20s or something like that, and saving for a house is just ridiculous. That's an absolute dream. Things are crushing, taxes are high, your job doesn't pay well, all this sort of stuff, and you might think to yourself that the next 4 years, you understand, are not your whole life. Get it? But seeing where your money goes, seeing where your taxes go, and seeing what, and working a job that you might hate or something like that every day, just to see it go to this government that specifically wants to rub your nose in it, can be very depressing, and it can make you, if you're understanding of the compound effect especially, you'll think all that could have just been put into my future and into my children, and it's gone to migrant hotels or something like that, something else that you just simply don't agree with, and it feels like that line at the end of 1984, which is such an over-referenced book, but it feels like that line at the end of 1984 of imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. It's not forever. It's for the next 3 or 4 years. Now, there are even people that say, is there even going to be in England, is there even going to be a country to rebuild after 3 or 4 years? Yes, there is. There is. There is going to be a country to rebuild in 3 or 4 years. I've made a few videos about brain rot recently, and I have been very specific that I think that people should turn that sort of thing off. But when I had Instagram, quite a few reels had come up about Singapore, and the leader of Singapore, I think probably after the 50s, who made it into the economic first world powerhouse really that it is today. And there's a specific piece of speech that he has where he's saying whoever rules needs to have that iron in him. Whoever rules Singapore must have that iron in him. If it's not Singapore, that's going to sound ridiculous, but I think it is. So many countries have had far worse than what we're going through right now and been able to bounce back from it in really quite a short period of time. And you don't need to be like Ireland to come back to that example of having civil war and then just being dosed up with WEF money and cheap immigration. You don't need to have that level of being plugged into international finance to achieve it as well. Ingenuity and so many of the things that have improved the world have come from Western Europe, and much more specifically have come from Britain so many times and for so long that I think once we break free, this is maybe why civil war is attractive to a lot of people, because we see it as a breaking free from this international machine which we know is killing us and at the very least replacing us. Once we break free from that and we have those shackles off, the amount, as long, the country that we have there, unregulated, a bit of a Wild West, and free to express its soul with will, and not having to curtail its every opinion, not having to curtail its invention, not having to repress its most productive citizens at the expense of just unproductive ones or unproductive invaders. That will be something to seriously reckon with, and it's going to be something that happens within the next couple of years. You want to be prepared for this golden age, and I really want to impress on everybody who's listening to this now that is what's going to happen. There is going to be a golden age. It is just around the corner, and we don't actually have to do that much except see through this time period of restraint, of bureaucracy, of HR, of the Labour Party, of Keir Starmer. That's all we have to see through at this point. After that, there's a golden age, there's remigration, there is exceptionalism recognised, there is invention is back on the table, there is life in everyday life, there is excitement again. There is all this back on the table that is all just around the corner, and all you simply have to do is get through the next couple of years, basically. And to get through the next couple of years and to be best positioned to take advantage of all the opportunities, you need to become a Renaissance man. Right now, you need to be someone that's independent, is not a know-it-all, but is extremely diverse in your knowledge. And what I don't mean by that is that your knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep. That's what you get from short form content. That's what you get from TikTok and Instagram. Not really knowing anything about everything, but knowing everything. And that makes people to such annoying know-it-alls when they repeat sound bites that they've heard. What you should focus on now is, for one thing, as I've mentioned in my videos about brain rot, getting your time back. Becoming productive in your free time and becoming unplugged from constant stimulation, constant reels and Instagram and all that sort of stuff. Becoming unplugged from that, then becoming unplugged from YouTube, from gaming, this sort of thing. Anything that you do still need to decompress. I just want to say that you still need to decompress, and sometimes that can be done by, as you'll be seeing on the video now, shooting down a few planes and blowing up a few Panzers in War Thunder, or whatever it is. Okay, sometimes you just need to decompress, but make sure that you are padding a lot of your decompression time out with reading. With, I like to woodwork, right? Do that, try that. Just start doing a couple of things. First of all, unplug yourself from the system in that way. Become reliant on yourself, on things that you can easily access, like books, for entertainment and for your downtime. That is going to give you the imagination back. That's going to give you back the imagination that you had when you were a child, which is just something that's incredible. Also, make sure that you are not dependent on drugs. If you have drug habits, kick them. If you have poor money habits as well, kick them. Any kind of addiction, whether it's some anime or something like that, get off it. Next, I think it's always worth focusing on what you can do in your house. Is your house clean? Is it cluttered? Clean it. If it's cluttered, declutter it. Get things out of there that you just don't use anymore. Look at Marie Kondo, the Japanese lady who talks about spark joy as a bit of a philosophy. And maybe don't embrace, this crushed grey velvet minimalism totally. I don't really like that. Embrace quality though. Embrace minimalism in the sense that everything that you have does its job perfectly. If you've got 10 different if you've gone, oh yeah, I want to get into something that's physical, and then you've bought a toolbox from Temu and it's based, and you buy 10 of them for fucking 50 quid, and they're basically the equivalent of McDonald's toys. That's not right. Buy something that's cheap, and then if you use it enough that it breaks, buy something that's a good version of it. That's a good bit of advice, and I think that everyone can take that to the bank. Buy a cheap toolkit from Halfords or whatever. If you use it enough that it breaks, replace it with something that is high quality, like DeWalt or something like that, that actually costs a bit of money. That way you'll know what you like and you never go bankrupt just trying hobbies. You also want to try hobbies. You also want to get physically active, of course, but the next step after you have started clearing up your house, after you started clearing up your mind as well, is to find something that's productive. It doesn't need to necessarily make you money, but something that's productive. Learning, I've always mentioned that I like the idea of learning how to work on engines, of writing my own book and things like that. Learning that kind of thing is really, really important. That's such a good skill to have, how to get your creativity out. And if that is mechanical and it's the form of engines, or if it's creative and it's the form of writing a book, say, these are things that are important to do. You need to then slowly start becoming more and more independent. Do you live in the middle of a city? You're totally dependent on transit, on bus routes, on trams, things that are always on strike if you live in the UK. You need to move out of there, go and live somewhere cheap. If it means that you have to get a slightly poorer paying job, that's fine. If your mortgage is eating up half of, just think of it this way, if your mortgage is eating up half of your income, your rent is eating up half your income, it doesn't matter if you need to move somewhere and take a lower paying job if you can get into a house that now only is a quarter of your income or something like that. That's fine. Like that is just the way that you need to think about it. What percentage is it of your income, not, raw numbers. That's the direction that you need to go. After that point, I think it probably depends on how far you want to take it. I personally do want to do some level of homesteading and have some level of independence on myself for food, for repairs and things like that. I want to be a repairman around the house, and these are all things that in times gone by you would have learned from your father, but that's just not something that's been seen useful to pass on when there's been less time and everything like that nowadays. It's something that is definitely worth teaching yourself now though, and that's something that I would take to the bank. That's something that I would always say. You'll never go wrong training yourself to be independent. And once you get off of TikTok, once you get off of Reels and all this other shit, that is the fun part. That's the bit that becomes so fun. Learning. It's like being a child again. When you're a kid, you loved to learn. Even if you were in a shit school and everything like that, you loved to learn. So when you can get back that sort of lust for self-education, that's going to go so far to preparing yourself for what happens in a few years. And just so you know, that's going to save you money, because when the stocks get cheap during whatever crash comes, when the stocks get really cheap, that's how you're going to be buying them, with the money that you saved by being a repairman, doing your own stuff, carving your own groove into the world. That is how you're going to get ahead, basically, with everything that you've saved. All the skills as well that you have, these are all going to be in demand. When remigration happens, they're going to want people to do the laborious tasks that we were originally just paying minimum wage for. There's going to be a big uptick in wages. All this stuff is going to come. Just be prepared for it. Be prepared for it.